Hello, everybody. Welcome back to ABC Learning English.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our show. I am Eva.
And I am Adam. We are very happy to talk to you today. How are you doing, Eva?
I am doing great, Adam. And I am very excited today. We have a very special topic. We are talking about learning languages.
Right. English is very important today. Our world is very big, but we connect with each other every day.
Wow, yes. More than 1.5 billion people speak English around the world. That is a very big number.
It really is. People use English for international business. They use English when they travel to new countries. Students use English to study at school and university.
And we use English on the internet every day. We send emails, we read the news, and we watch digital videos. English is everywhere.
Right. So, because English is so important, we have many ways to learn it. We have many books, many apps, and many learning plans. We look at many materials today. We look at phonetic guides, the CEFR framework, and modern apps.
But today, we want to ask a very big question. What is the absolute best way for an adult to learn English?
Yes. How can an adult speak English well? Do they need to study grammar rules first? Do they need to learn vocabulary lists step by step?
Or do they need to jump in and just speak? Do they need to talk to real people right away?
Oh, this is a very interesting debate. I will say that students need structure. They need rules and basic steps first.
And I will say that students need real life. They need to speak in real situations to become fluent.
Let me start, Eva. English is a very complex language. It is not easy. You cannot just guess the words.
Really? Why not?
Because you need a strong system. I look at many learning plans. For example, a 60-day plan to speak English fluently. I also look at basic pronunciation guides.
I see. And what do you think?
I think we need to build language like we build a house. You need strong blocks. We need clear grammar lessons. We need to practice sounds. We need to learn important word lists. These are not just school exercises. They are very necessary.
I hear you, but that sounds very heavy.
It is necessary, Eva. Think about the CEFR framework. It is the gold standard for a reason.
Right. It goes from A1 to C2.
Exactly. It tells us to go slowly, step by step. First, you are at A1. You learn very simple sentences. For example, you learn to say, "Where does your rabbit live?" or "My name is Adam."
Yes, very basic factual sentences.
Then you slowly move up. You go to A2, then B1, then B2. Finally, C2. You learn more complex things. If you do this slowly, you do not make permanent mistakes.
What do you mean by permanent mistakes?
Sometimes, students learn the wrong way. They say a word wrong many times. Then, it becomes a bad habit. They cannot fix it later. We call these fossilized errors. Or they stop learning because it is too hard. They hit a wall. A clear, step-by-step plan helps them.
I understand your point, Adam, but I have a very different idea.
Oh, tell me.
I think treating English like a math problem is bad. If you give students too many strict rules, they feel scared, they freeze.
But they need the rules to speak correctly.
Language is about communication. It is about talking to people. It is a reflex. If you tell an adult to remember 12 different vowel sounds before they buy a cup of coffee, you kill their motivation. They will feel very sad.
I do not think you kill it completely.
Wow, you really do. Let me tell you about a study. It is from the University of Michigan in 2016. It is in our source material.
Okay, tell me about the study.
The researchers looked at two groups of students for 12 weeks. Group A learned the traditional way. They used books, they did grammar exercises, they memorized rules, they filled in the blanks on paper.
That sounds like a good, solid plan.
Wait, Adam. Group B learned in a completely different way. They only learned by speaking. They used video chat on their computers. They talked to real people every day.
Interesting. And what happened after 12 weeks?
The results were amazing. Group A did not improve much. They stayed almost the same.
Really? Zero significant improvement?
Right. But Group B learned very fast. They developed much better. They knew many new words. They could listen and understand much better. And, most importantly, they felt very confident when they spoke.
Wow, that is a big difference.
Yes, because context is so important. Context anchors meaning. For example, look at platforms like Hello Nabu.
What do they do?
They put you in real situations. Imagine you are at a business lunch in Dublin. Someone offers you more pasta. You learn to say, "Sure, I'll have a little more." This is real life. It is much better than looking at a book and learning the isolated verb to eat.
Okay, Eva, I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective.
Sure, go ahead.
If a beginner goes to that business lunch in Dublin, how do they know what words to use? They know nothing.
They pick it up from the context. They listen to the other people.
But you need raw materials first. You need some basic words to even start listening. I strongly support using word lists. Let's look at the Oxford 3000 list.
What is that?
The University of Western Ontario did a study. They found that just 800 very common English words make up 75% of everyday spoken language.
Oh, wow. 75%? That is a lot.
Yes. Think about a new student. They feel overwhelmed because there are so many words in English. But when you tell them, you only need to learn 800 words first, they feel very happy. It is a huge psychological relief. You do not need to learn 100,000 words today. You just target the most important words first.
Sure, but
Let me finish this thought, Eva. You can use flashcard apps. For example, Quizlet. You can look at the word on your phone. You see it again and again. You use spaced repetition. You remember it. You need this baseline before you talk to people. Without these 800 words, a real conversation is just a wall of noise. You will not understand anything. Curated lists give you tools to build sentences before you go to the lunch.
I am sorry, Adam. But I just do not buy that. Let me tell you why.
Why not? They are very fast and helpful.
Yes, the 75% number sounds comforting, but flashcards take words completely out of real-life context. A word alone does not teach you how to use it in real life. You lose all the subtle shades of meaning.
What do you mean by that?
Instead of looking at one word on a card, students need to learn whole sentences. Linguists call this sentence mining.
Sentence mining? That sounds like hard work. What is it?
Exactly that. It means you find a good, functional sentence and you learn the whole sentence by heart. When you learn a whole sentence, you build grammar intuition and vocabulary at the same time. You learn words that go together naturally.
Words that go together? Can you give an example?
Yes, we call them collocations. For example, in English, we say heavy rain. We do not say thick rain. We say make a mistake. We do not say do a mistake.
Oh, I see. A single flashcard won't teach you that.
Exactly. The student who memorizes 800 isolated single words still has a big problem. Every time they want to speak, they have to build the sentence from scratch in their head. They have to run a translation process.
What do they think about?
They think, what is the subject? What is the verb? What is the object? Wait, what is the preposition? This takes too much time. That is exactly why they stutter and hesitate. But if they learn whole sentences, they have ready-to-use responses.
That is an interesting point, Eva, though I would frame it differently.
Okay, how do you see it?
Yes, whole sentences and collocations are incredibly useful. But if they do not understand why the sentence is built that way, they are merely parroting phrases. They are just repeating like a bird.
Ooh.
They lack the capacity to create new sentences. If a student only knows the exact memorized sentence for heavy rain, how do they intelligently talk about a heavy workload at the office? They cannot. They need the architectural understanding to swap the words out.
I see your point.
And this connects directly to the physical mechanics of the language. Let's talk about mother tongue influence, or MTI.
Oh, here we go. It's important.
This is a massive hurdle. It requires explicit mechanical correction, not just exposure. English spelling is a terrible guide to pronunciation. We call it deep orthography.
That is very true.
Think about the words, though. Through, tough, and bow. Let's spell them. T-H-O-U-G-H. They all share the exact same ending letters, but they produce entirely different sounds.
Yes, that is very difficult.
You cannot just mimic your way out of that. You need to understand the underlying phonetics. Our source material outlines this. Look at native Spanish speakers learning English.
Right. What happens?
In Spanish, vowels are neither short nor long. But English has a unique stress-based rhythm. English has weak vowels. Also, Spanish speakers often replace a W sound with a G sound.
Yes, I hear that sometimes.
Without explicit instruction using the International Phonetic Alphabet, the IPA, they will fail. Without a teacher showing them the anatomical structure of the mouth, they will practice bad habits. They will speak quickly, sure, but incomprehensibly. Nobody will understand them.
I see the logic in wanting to correct mechanics early, but we have to ground this in the reality of the adult learner.
What is the reality?
Absolute beginners lack the framework to understand complex phonetic explanations. If you stop a beginner in the middle of a sentence and you say, adjust your alveolar ridge placement to fix your T sound, you will get a blank stare. They will not understand. It is an absurd expectation.
You think it is too hard for them?
Yes. The website busyteacher.org emphasizes a vital rule. Show, don't tell. Natural mimicry is better. Students can copy native speakers. This gives instant contextual feedback. You do not need to overwhelm the learner with medical diagrams of the mouth.
But mimicry has its limits, Eva.
Does it? A learner can watch Netflix shows. They can use the language learning with Netflix extension for dual subtitles, or they can just listen to Spotify music. They naturally absorb the rhythm and the pronunciation of English.
And when they make mistakes, who corrects them?
They can talk to live one-on-one tutors on platforms like Preply, or they can use AI feedback tools like Planet Spark, SparksX, or Video Advisor. These tools offer immediate, contextual corrections based on natural speech. They correct pronunciation organically in a real conversation. They do not isolate abstract sounds on a chalkboard.
I am not convinced by that line of reasoning, Eva, because mimicry fundamentally assumes the learner can actually hear the difference between two sounds in the first place.
What do you mean?
Often, if a sound does not exist in a learner's native language, their brain physically filters it out. They literally cannot perceive the difference.
Really?
Yes, there is no difference between a short I and a long E to them, like the difference between ship and sheep. You must give them explicit theoretical instruction to point out that those are two completely distinct sounds. You cannot mimic what your brain does not register.
That is a fair point, Adam.
Thank you. And this brings us to the critical sequence of skills. How do we overcome the speaking barrier? I maintain that receptive skills must come first.
Receptive skills? You mean listening and reading?
Exactly. Listening and reading must precede or perfectly balance productive skills. Productive skills are speaking and writing. We take in information before we create and share it. It is basic cognitive load management. Structured curriculums like Babbel or the CEFR guidelines deliberately pace learners to respect this.
But adults want to talk immediately.
I know, but attempting complex abstract conversations is a C1 level task. If you ask an A1 learner to do this without basic skills, it creates massive frustration. If a learner cannot navigate the basic grammar of I am from or he is from, throwing them into context is a recipe for complete failure. It causes crippling language anxiety.
That is a compelling argument, Adam. But have you considered the actual data on learner motivation and human psychology?
Psychology? What do you mean?
A linear waiting game is bad. If you tell an enthusiastic student, you must silently read and listen for months before you are allowed to open your mouth, you absolutely kill their motivation.
Well,
The American Society of Training and Development, the ASTD, conducted a study on accountability. This is incredibly relevant here.
let's unpack it. What did they find?
They found that committing to a real person increases goal completion to an astounding 95%.
Wow, 95%.
95%. When you interact immediately via language exchanges like tandem or conversation exchange, you force the synchronous development of all language skills. You do it out of pure necessity.
So, the human connection pushes them?
Yes, the social contract of having a human being waiting for your response forces you to engage. You bypass the fear of making mistakes. The environment is communicative, not evaluative. They are not testing you. The 2016 University of Michigan study perfectly corroborates this.
How so?
The students who spoke from day one didn't just get better at speaking. They actually performed better in listening comprehension and grammar as well. Speaking isn't the final reward for learning grammar, it is the very mechanism through which grammar is actually acquired in the brain.
That ASTD accountability statistic is actually fascinating, Eva. 95% goal completion just by committing to a real person is hard to ignore. I'll grant you that the human motivation factor is huge.
It really is.
However, my concern is what actually happens during that highly motivated conversation. You are severely underestimating the psychological damage of repeated communicative failure.
Failure?
Yes. Accountability to a tandem partner gets you to log on. But if a learner enters that chat with absolutely no grammatical scaffolding, the conversation is incredibly shallow. They are relying entirely on the native speaker's extreme patience.
Well, most language exchange partners are patient. They want to help.
True. But look at the CEFR framework again. It shows us what that looks like. Learners at the A1 level are only equipped for basic factual exchanges. They can ask for a drink in a shop or write a simple message.
Right.
If we push them to speak immediately about complex topics without a structured foundation, they lack the tools. They cannot express their actual sophisticated adult thoughts. This forces them to simplify their entire identity to match their limited vocabulary, which is incredibly frustrating for a smart adult. Curated lists and structured grammar lessons provide the necessary safety net. They give the learner the tools to construct meaning independently, rather than relying on their conversation partner to constantly guess what they are trying to say.
But Adam, you are assuming that making mistakes equates to communicative failure. It does not.
It doesn't?
No. In immersive learning, mistakes aren't failures. They are the exact stepping stones to fluency. Look at the Planet Spark methodology.
What do they do?
They encourage children to engage in real-life role-play immediately. Ordering food, giving presentations. They don't wait until the student has completely mastered the English article system to let them speak. They speak, they make a mistake, and the grammar is introduced right there in context when it actually matters to the learner.
That's a great approach for kids, sure.
And it works for adults, too. Going back to your point about adult learners wanting to express sophisticated thoughts, we've all been there, right?
Yes.
Imagine this. You memorize the textbook rules for ordering coffee perfectly. You walk into the cafe. You deliver your perfectly constructed A1 sentence.
Okay, I say my sentence.
And then the barista asks, "Room for cream?"
Uh-oh.
Which wasn't in your textbook, and you completely freeze. When a learner uses Hello Nabu to navigate a simulated hotel check-in in London, they aren't just learning the words reservation or receptionist. They are learning the tone, the warmth, the natural rhythm of the interaction. You simply cannot replicate that unpredictability and nuance with a flashcard or a grammar worksheet.
Yet we are not talking about children in the Planet Spark example, Eva. We are largely talking about adult or older learners. They already possess a fully developed first language. The cognitive processes are fundamentally different.
How so?
A child has years of a silent period, pure immersion, before they produce complex sentences. An adult learner does not have the luxury of spending 3 years silently absorbing English before their first international business meeting.
That is true. They are busy.
This is exactly why explicit instruction in advanced grammar and sentence structure becomes necessary as one progresses.
I'm not saying grammar isn't necessary.
Right. But when we look at the transition from a B2 to a C1 level, the learner must move from expressing basic opinions on familiar topics to dealing with complex, abstract, and sensitive transactions.
Yes, C1 is very difficult.
You cannot achieve C1 proficiency where you can read quickly enough to cope with an academic course or write professional emails with sophisticated nuance purely by chatting on video calls and making mistakes. It requires the deliberate, analytical study of language that structured roadmaps provide. You need to explicitly understand the passive voice, conditionals, and reported speech as outlined in Week 5 of the 60-day roadmap.
I don't disagree that advanced comprehension requires engagement with complex concepts, Adam, but the approach to getting there is what matters.
Okay, what is your approach?
Sentence mining scales perfectly from beginner to advanced levels. Instead of sitting down and studying the abstract language, you do not need to learn the abstract algebraic rule of the third conditional.
What do they do instead?
A learner mines 50 real-world sentences that use a third conditional in compelling, high-stakes contexts. They internalize the pattern so deeply it becomes a reflex.
I see.
The problem with the highly structured textbook approach is that it routinely produces learners who can ace a C1 grammar exam on paper, but still freeze when that barista goes off script. The ultimate goal of language is human connection.
Yes, connection is the goal.
If you spend 60 days on a roadmap prioritizing worksheets from the spoken English guru and analyzing grammatical graphs, you might build a fantastic theoretical architecture in your head. But you haven't built a communicative reflex.
And yet, Eva, if we examine the actual tools that highly successful independent learners rely on, there is a clear, undeniable demand for structure.
Like what tools?
Look at the USA Learns platform. It is funded by the U.S. Department of Education. It carefully structures its units for new immigrants navigating a new life. It doesn't just throw them into a high-pressure workplace and say, mimic your coworkers.
That would be very hard.
Yes, it offers a compassionate step-by-step process. Introduce, clarify, practice, and apply. It breaks down topics into listening comprehension, vocabulary, spelling, and self-check exercises. This structured repetition is what ensures that the language actually sticks in the long term.
I know that platform.
Even massive apps that gamify learning, like Duolingo, rely heavily on a highly structured, linear progression of grammatical concepts, even if they present them in bite-sized chunks. The foundational architecture must be there, or the entire house collapses under the weight of real-world complexity.
It's interesting you mentioned Duolingo, Adam, because while it is undeniably popular for gamified daily practice, our source material explicitly notes its severe limitations.
What are the limitations?
It highlights the light grammar explanations, the famously unrealistic sentences like, "The owl is drinking milk," and a significant difficulty in helping learners make the jump to actually speaking confidently. This perfectly illustrates the flaw in overly structured translation-based progression. It builds a false sense of security.
So what do you prefer?
Contrast this with Rosetta Stone. It uses visual immersion and completely removes the native language from the process. Or look at the recommendation in the materials to simply change your phone and social media settings to English.
I do love that trick. It works.
These are immersive tactics designed to force the adult brain to adapt to English as a living environment rather than a subject to be studied. When a learner engages with a language exchange partner on Tandem or uses bilingual app to read news with side-by-side translations, they are treating English as a vibrant tool to access the world, not as a mathematical equation to be balanced.
Looking at everything we've unpacked today, Eva, I think my takeaway is this.
Let's hear it.
While I absolutely concede that real-world practice and human connection are what breathe life into a language, the underlying architecture is simply non-negotiable.
Okay,
Without the deliberate, strategic mastery of tools like the Oxford 3000, without a conscious, explicit awareness of phonetic mechanics like the 44 English sounds, and without the grammatical scaffolding provided by frameworks like the CEFR, learners are left to blindly guess at the structure of the language.
I hear you, Adam.
This structured approach isn't meant to be a punishment. It provides the necessary safety net that makes accurate, sophisticated, and truly independent communication possible. It prevents the fossilization of errors and ensures a clear, measurable path from basic, transactional English all the way to advanced academic or professional fluency.
And from my perspective, Adam, the core truth remains that language is fundamentally a tool for human connection.
Yes, it is.
The data from the University of Michigan and the widespread pedagogical shifts we see in modern platforms prove that diving straight into context is the most efficient and, honestly, the most motivating path to fluency.
Motivation is key.
Embracing mistakes in live, unscripted conversation, absorbing whole sentence patterns rather than isolated vocabulary words, and utilizing instant feedback through video chat or AI deeply accelerates the learning process. The structured approach often treats language like a museum artifact to be studied from afar behind glass.
That is a nice comparison.
Thank you. The immersive approach treats it like a living ecosystem that you simply have to jump into to truly understand.
Despite our different philosophical starting points, Eva, I think there are distinct areas of convergence in our reading of this source material. We agree on some things.
Really? Like what?
We both clearly agree on the necessity of balancing receptive skills, taking language in through reading and listening with productive skills, putting it out there through speaking and writing. Neither side of that equation can be entirely ignored if true, holistic proficiency is the goal.
Yes, absolutely. You need all four skills. And we also completely align on the importance of setting specific, measurable goals.
Oh yes, goal setting is vital.
As the material suggests, setting SMART goals is important, like aiming to make 5 minutes of small talk with native speakers for an upcoming trip in 3 months. That is infinitely more effective than chasing some vague, undefined notion of fluency.
I agree. And crucially, both of our methodologies demand consistent daily practice. Whether that means 10 minutes on a flashcard app or a 30-minute live language exchange call, you must practice.
Yes. Ultimately, deeply understanding these differing methodologies allows a learner to curate a highly personalized approach, an approach that fits their specific psychological needs and practical circumstances.
Exactly. The source material we've explored today holds an absolute abundance of strategies for both the structured planner and the immersive speaker, and there is so much more to explore in this video.
Indeed, we will end the debate here today without declaring a definitive winner. We leave you, the listener, to reflect on the data, the studies, and the frameworks we've discussed. You can decide which approach best aligns with your own language learning journey.
We hope this helps you find your best way to learn English.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Remember to review what you learned, and please don't forget to subscribe to ABC Learning English for more great podcasts.
Have a great week, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye, guys. Keep practicing.
Great job today. Remember, small daily progress is the secret to fluency. Keep practicing, and I'll see you in the next video.